Attorney wheel. Welcome to the Lore and Valor podcast. I'm your host, Justin Watson, and joining me again today are Joelle Presby, veteran naval officer, author of the DeBear Snake Launcher, upcoming from Maine. Dabaret. I'm sorry. Cancel me for my mispronunciation. I'm terrible. The Dabaret Snake Launcher, upcoming from Bane. And Kacey Azell, the author of the Psyche of War series, the Ember and Gunpowder and Embers series, and with me, the Romanov Rescue series, and Tom Kratman, as well as several other things, and a currently serving, though not for much longer, U.S. Air Force helicopter pilot. And I forgot to mention, Joelle is an Annapolis graduate, and Kacey is a U.S. Air Force Academy graduate, so you have every flavor of ring knocker here on Joint Fires. And today, we are here to talk to you about the much-awaited Arcane episode 2. Sorry it took us so long, but we all have day jobs, families, and a lot of writing to do and a lot of travel to get through. So I'm happy to be back with y'all because episode 2 and 3 start to really pick up. I remember both of them leave oh my god place, but we'll start from the start. Oh, and as always, when we talk about streaming or movies, huge spoiler warnings. If you have not seen episode 2, go and watch it before you watch our review. We'll try not to spoil later episodes of the series, but if anything slips out, we apologize. This episode started out in a fairly good trope, I think, by showing the events of the beginning of, well, not the beginning, but the events of the heist from episode 1 that Vi, Powder and crew, were conducting from Jace's perspective. So we're in this, the owner of the house's perspective. We're in this upscale home with all this weird equipment, the heroes, our protagonists were seeing last time. And we see this occur from the perspective of an uptown person from Piltover, from the wealthy elite, quote unquote. So what did you guys think? Joelle, you go ahead and kick off. What were your thoughts as we entered the story again?
I love it when I think a story is going one way and it goes somewhere else.
Yeah.
Having the glimpse that we saw from episode 1, I really thought that, okay, we've got some kids from the lower city causing trouble. I thought that little Caitlin was going to have died in the explosion.
Ooh.
So I was relieved to see, nope, she didn't die.
Yeah.
Because the story continues and later on, things are going to happen that are going to make this dark. But
yeah, the show goes to several dark places, but that's not one of them, fortunately.
Yeah. And that I thought that was going to be the justification for Zahn to really crack down.
Yeah. Well, I feel like the explosion in the upper class part of the city is probably reasonable justification for Zahn's. I won't say it's not a justification for overreaction. It's an understandable motivation for what's driving this conflict forward. Kacey, what did you think?
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. That the explosion is reasonable justification. I did think it was very interesting how, as the series progresses, you can tell. I thought that I enjoyed the amplification of tension that happens because you see these characters all trying to be like, all right, let's not make too big a deal out of this. Like, this is a big deal, but we're going to try and minimize the effects. And it's happening on all sides, and they just keep failing. Like, through no fault of their own, circumstances just prevent them from being able to be, to
except for Silka. He's not trying to minimize anything.
Well, right. Except for him. Yeah, exactly. Except for him.
And Marcus Grayson, the police executive officer, the young
cop. Right. That's true.
But he also, well, that's episode 3. We'll get into more of Marcus.
We'll get to him.
Yeah, it's a little out of order, but I found it interesting because it's one of those things. And when you're posturing, when you're negotiating, whether it's between factions in a city or between countries, there's always a fine line of how conciliatory do we want to be and how much strength do we want to project. Right. And Marcus wants to err on the side of strength, right? He wants to put the understudy in its place. However, in so doing, he massively escalates the crisis because he undermined the position of the one leader in Undercity who's calling for moderation. And I thought that was just brilliant writing, and Grayson's furious with him, rightfully so.
Yeah, no, totally. I continue to be impressed by the writing in this show. Going back to your initial question, Justin, about what do we think of the opening of episode 2, where you show the opposite side of the heist, from a different point of view. That, like, I love that. I absolutely love that, because that is a who, I don't know who said it, but it's the whole, whatever. Someone said this, and they were smart. And
at least two smart people will have said it now. So go ahead.
every villain is the hero of their own story, right? And so it doesn't look like Jace is a villain at this point, but I don't know, things are changing rapidly, so who knows. But I appreciated seeing that episode from his perspective, because of that principle of every villain is the hero. Every character, like, it's not just the villains, right? Every character is the hero of their own story. Every human being is the hero of their own story. And it makes it such a richer storytelling experience when you're able to understand and kind of view those perspectives, I think. And so I was really excited that they chose to take that tack with it, right off the bat at the beginning of episode 2, because and like you said, Joelle, I kind of thought it was a little bit unexpected. I mean, I wasn't, with the intricacy and the amount of, like, because they showed us like a lot of cool equations and a lot of, like, really ornate equipment, and of course the magic glowy rocks, right? Like, it surprised me that the guy whose apartment they ended up raiding was actually not a senior dude. Like, he's kind of and that was an interesting twist.
I was expecting it was going to be the patriarch of the family who
head of the magic college or whatever.
I will say I really appreciated that, and furthermore, I think it adds so much depth to the story that you do get the councilwoman Mel, the extraordinarily beautiful character.
I was gonna say, she is beautiful.
I mean, like, I've had a kind of a thing for animation since Rogue from X-Men the animated series when I was like 11 years old. But she's noticeable, and she's a very cool character. But like, I like that they show that even in Zon, there's still gradient. It's not all gods and nobles who live up in Zon. Like, Jace is a normal dude who's a refugee from we don't know exactly where yet, who barely survived by the skin of his teeth, and through talent managed to rise. So it creates complexity where, this is, I think it's pretty obvious by episode 2, this is a story where socioeconomic class warfare matters. That is a central theme running through the whole series. But
and Mel is super rich, but doesn't feel like she's rich enough, because there are other people in other cities who are a lot richer.
Yeah, and because it's not about, once you're that rich, it's not about the actual money, it's about status and power at that point. But the fact is, you have Jace living comfortably, luxuriously in another city, but he's not the elite, right? And I thought there are normal people who live in the nicer part of the city. It's not just the clueless 1% and the bottom rungs of society. The whole society exists along the spectrum. I think that's really important, because without that, I feel like the story would be a caricature of those kind of issues. It would just be preachy nonsense. But as it is, it's actually a nuanced perspective on it. So I really love Jace and Jace's background.
And I fully, and the other piece of it, and maybe you said this, but what I also love is that I'm not a big fan of just mustache twirling villains, right? Like, I like my villains to have some complexity. And the same is true of the overall, like, social strata, right? To show that Piltover is a society where a young man with nothing, less than nothing, can actually make his way up into, the upper echelon of said society through hard work and talent, is really advanced, because it's not just like, oh, all the rich people are terrible people, who live on their privilege and do nothing with it. And like you said, it makes it so much more nuanced of a story, and really gets a lot closer to examining some of those classism issues, I think,
Mhm.
because it echoes reality.
Yeah.
And we get to see some of the rich people talking amongst themselves about, okay, so that they've told Jace one thing about, we're going to pull you in front of the public board and you're going to say nothing about magic and you'll get a slap on the wrist. So remember to say that. But then they're talking amongst themselves about, magic would be really nice if we had access to magic, and that would make us. And so you get to see, we saw the conflict on Piltover, and now we're seeing the conflict of Zahn, of people thinking about how their own self-interest would be benefited if they did this one thing that would kind of be really nasty for society as a whole.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or would it? But how did Heimerdinger?
But they don't know.
Yeah. How did Heimerdinger work for you guys? He's a big tonal shift in his character design and his voice. So a little furry Yoda. What did you guys think of him?
I immediately thought Yoda, but I like how he just comes across as powerful and strong. Mm-hmm. Well, Yoda comes across as powerful and tiny.
I think my gut feeling says that he's going to end up being incredibly evil.
Interesting.
I don't know if that's true or not, but that's just based on how the twists, the character twists of the story have gone so far. I don't know. I have that feeling that he's going to end up being the, kind of like the Daenerys Targaryen. Not exactly like that, because she started off as a very vulnerable character, and that's why we were sympathetic to her. Mm-hmm. But someone who appears, I don't know. I could be totally wrong.
It turns out to flip a switch and turn into a monster. Yeah. I'm not going to tell you whether you're right or wrong. I'm going to tell you I didn't pick that up.
Okay.
At first, so your radar picked up something I didn't on that one. So that's really interesting in that perspective. At first, Heimerdinger didn't work very well for me because it was such a wait, what? What is he doing here? This feels like a little too serious of a story.
Well, he is a player character in the source material.
And I figured that too, that he was there because he had some role to play in the game as well. Yeah,
that he's part of the lore. He grows on me throughout the series, so we'll see how you guys think of him.
He's probably not really evil then.
We kind of glossed over it. So because of the explosion, obviously they're looking for the culprits of the heist, but Jace was apparently performing unsanctioned, un-OSHA regulated experiments in his patron's home, and obviously is called before the council. So apparently this warrants going up to the ruling body of the city, and he is, as we already discussed, not criminally prosecuted, but barred from academia and experimentation from that point forward. At which point, for me, I'll let you guys add your own thoughts. At which point, Jace, it's completely understandable he'd be upset, but I get a little annoyed with him when he's kind of going off on his mom about it.
Yeah.
It's like, Mom, why don't you believe in my science enough to let me be thrown out of the city? It's like, oh my God, Jace, calm down.
Yeah, right.
You're not 14 and you're not Anakin Skywalker. Get your shit together.
He got very my estimation of the character's age and maturity level dropped significantly right about then, because that's a very teenager move. It's like, oh God, Mom, why don't you just agree with me? Oh, and it's like, because I'm saving your ass, kid.
Yeah. And overall, I like Jace as a character, but he does have a few moments like that where I'm like, oh my God. Grow up, son.
Neither of you have teenagers yet, right?
I have a 13-year-old.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah.
I'm just stepping into that world.
Yeah. It's I mean, my kid's never been barred from academia or anything like that. My kid is a very good kid, but
do we even do that in our culture?
They preemptively discard Evelyn because they knew she'd genetically experiment with something to create an army of rabid squirrels, or I don't know, something random.
Yeah, but that whole that unreasonableness is very familiar to me as a graduated parent of a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. So, and Joelle, your thoughts? I didn't give
It's
you a chance to talk.
She'll call us in 10 years and be like, "Oh my God, you guys were so right."
I was kind of fortunate, I guess, in that my oldest was always the most stubborn and willful of our 4 kids. So I'm not saying it's not different, but it is not like a drastic shift. Like she's just bigger and more articulate. She basically argues about as much as she used to. So anyway, that was one. It's not exactly bad writing, but like you said, it did make me think less of the character because from his character design and his position, I'm assuming he's in his early 20s.
Right.
But he acted like he was about 15. Okay, Jace gets exiled. So, but the real like main conflict, I think, although Jace is important, the council is important, Heimerdinger is important, is we're still with Vonder and Grayson trying to keep the city from erupting. And the pressure's mounting. And like I said, Marcus goes down to the Undercity and gets in Vonder's face in front of his people. It's not a private discussion, which is huge. So how did that rising tension work for you, and what really stood out to you about that subplot?
That part wasn't that surprising for me. I guess part of the problem of becoming a storyteller professionally is there are certain things you just
go.
Yeah. And they need it for the story. They have to put that in there. They can't just skip it. But
I enjoyed it largely because it was, I'll say, well acted, a combination of animation and voice. And because you see the pressure mounting, you see Vonder continuously trying to talk his way out of it, and you see Vi's realization of Vonder's position. Like, I like that reveal and how that was handled.
Yeah, I thought that was very beautifully done. There just seems to be like a lot of elegance to the writing, because even though, like you said, Joelle, like it's sort of something that needs to happen for the story, because that tension needs to escalate, otherwise there's no story. And it's a somewhat predictable way of having that happen based on what we've already seen of Marcus's character. Again, I thought that the devil's in the details, right? And those details ended up just being very elegant, with the other thing that I appreciate about it, and this is something that I appreciate about most movies that I really enjoy, is that it's not just a book with pictures, right? The visual element is actually used to tell the story in a way that it wouldn't, it wouldn't necessarily make as much sense if you just had a narrative of all of those things happening, if that makes sense.
Right.
And of course, it's, we've talked about the art style before. It's beautiful artwork. It's very atmospheric. The play of light and shadow that the artists use is beautiful and amazing, and gives it that noirish feel that is 100% my jam. So yeah, I thought it was very well done.
I agree completely. And furthermore, like usually in live action, that means in place of inner monologue, you get facial expression, body language, and tone of voice. And in this one, it's so interesting to me about animation that is, I mean, it's somewhat a collaboration in a live action movie because the director is giving direction to an actor, but in a animation, I've always been fascinated with is like, oh no, there are so many people working to create that same effect. Whereas when we're writing, it's just us, and largely it's the actor when it's live action, but in animation, it's like puppetry, but ex post facto, so to speak. And I absolutely find that fascinating. And that this style, they wisely chose a style where, facial articulation is really high, and they get a lot of grit and emotion in the expression. So I really enjoy that, and I love Vi and Vonder's relationship. I think her reaction was understandably teenage. I feel like it's appropriate for who she is, but it wasn't,
because she's portrayed as a teenager.
Yeah, she's supposed to be, I think, I would guess 15, 16. I don't know. but that it was like, that's a realistic reaction, I think, but it was also, unlike Jace's reaction, it's like, yeah, that was, I feel like she's reasonable to feel the way she feels about that. That would be very traumatic. To learn that your adoptive father is cutting deals with these people you see as oppressors, even if you realize in your front brain that it's really kind of necessary.
Yeah, 100%.
So let's see, what else? So did I miss anything? Character Victor. Kind of impression did he make? The guy with the cane, in case you don't know who I'm talking about.
Who's starting to team up with Jace.
Yeah, exactly. The one who stopped him from jumping off the ledge, literally, when he thought he'd lost everything.
Yeah. I kind of, watching this episode, thought that that's just an extra character. They don't even really need him. He's not important. and having seen a little more, it's like, nope. He matters. You just kind of slipped him in there, so he didn't seem all that significant. But this is going to be important later.
Yeah.
And another thing about this episode too that for me became clearer later is, we've got a lot of Vi understanding and starting to see what's going on, and Powder's not on the screen. You know what? She doesn't know what's going on. Nobody's explaining anything to her, and that matters. They're treating her like a little kid who can't do anything. Even though in episode 1, what really started all this? I mean, Vi came up with the plan and they went, and if they hadn't gone, there wouldn't have been an explosion. But it was Powder.
Yeah.
And nobody's paying attention to Powder. Nobody's giving Powder the tools to be able to make better decisions with her incredible intellect.
Your insight serves you well. Yeah, no, you're spot on. You're spot on.
I thought it was interesting the way that they introduced. It looked to me almost like they introduced Mel and Victor as foils for one another in this episode, because on the one hand we have, the wealthiest woman in Piltover, who is obviously very intelligent, obviously very manipulative, as you figure out once you figure out what the hell she's doing with those little puzzle boxes that she's buying, right? and she's beautiful, she's flawless, right? I mean, like, oh my God, if I could cosplay this woman, like, I would never wear anything else, right?
Without getting lynched.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously I don't have her beautiful skin tone, but just wow. And then we have this, this other character who appears, like you said, Joelle, almost like a throwaway. He's this functionary who walks with a limp, has a cane, like his, and again, part of it's the art style where they're able to exaggerate certain features to certain effect, so he looks like slightly off proportion, like his face is slightly off proportion, you know what I mean? And, and so here's him, they introduce him just very briefly, and they introduce Mel, also just sort of very briefly. And I thought that was an interesting technique, the way that they introduced those two characters together in this episode. Obviously, both of them are going to have larger parts to play very soon, even. So, yeah.
Indeed. So Silco, so far, like, I'll go ahead and admit that philosophically the show puts me in an uncomfortable place here, because you have when I took my notes, I noticed like two philosophical aphorisms, and I agreed with the villains aphorism and disagreed with the heroines, because Silco says power does not go to those who were born fastest, smartest, or strongest. It goes to those who will do anything to achieve it. And I don't find that, to be clear, I don't find that aspirational, but I find it accurate. It's like, no, we shouldn't live that way. But by my observation, that's true. Like, I hate to say it because it sounds like sour grapes from someone who just got out as a junior officer, but the guys and gals I saw climbing the chain as fast as possible, getting promoted below the zone, it wasn't always because they were super talented or great leaders. It was because they wanted that life more than they wanted anything else. And some of them were great, and some of them were a little more selfishly motivated. So just in the real world, I look around and I'm like, Silco ain't wrong.
Yeah. No, I you're right. You hit it on the head. He's not wrong. They're doing that thing that I love, that I tried very hard to do in my own book series, where you introduce this character and he's terrible and you hate him. And then you give the audience all the reasons why he is the way he is. And the audience starts to resonate with him and starts to sympathize with him.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe he even, like, he's wrong. He's clearly wrong, but he does have a point.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And that's challenging about this show. So, I mean, even just so far, even the first, just 2 episodes, it's challenging because it kind of makes you think, like, oh, okay, well, why did I immediately assume that, Vi and Powder were and Vonder were the good guys? Is it just because I saw their perspective first? Well, what does that say about me?
Yeah. And we all know that's a powerful tool as a writer. If I put you in someone's shoes and don't have them do anything obviously psychopathic or sociopathic to go with, they don't kick the puppy and they don't murder a kid. If I put you in their perspective, you're probably going to think you're with the hero. It's true.
Yeah.
So the aphorism from the light side of the Force in this one was when Vi tells Powder, that which makes you different makes you strong. And I'm like,
maybe.
Sure. Our differences are valuable and our unique perspectives are valuable. But when you lay it down as a universal statement, I'm like, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
Like, I can think of multiple exceptions to that. So it was one of those things where it was one of the few times where the writing does something schmaltzy, in my opinion. It's like they tell us something we want to believe. And maybe Vi would say that, so it's not necessarily bad writing. But I'm like, that's it's nice, but that is not always true. From my perspective, it's often true, but it's not always true.
I think it depends on. You ready? I'm going to split some hairs, like split them right down the middle. I think it depends on your definition of strength in the context we're talking about, right? Because oftentimes, and you did say this, that oftentimes it is true that that which makes you different makes you stronger, right? It's the whole boy named Sue. Philosophy.
You're gonna have to get mean or die. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But what is strength, right? Like, what is strong? I actually got into this, and I apologize if this is a digression. I actually got into a debate about the character of Cinderella from the fairy tale and whether or not she was a strong character and or like a strong person, right? And I argued that she was, because in that instance, she exhibited endurance and was able to take being, treated badly and not let it change her into someone she didn't want to be, and still was able to retain her kindness. And that to me was an example of strength. I guess not everybody agrees with that. Right. That maybe that doesn't seem like strength to everyone. So I think it depends a little bit on what you're calling strength, because I think that what makes us different may not make us strong necessarily, but it makes us makes us who we are.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't think it's completely just schmaltz. That's all.
Yeah. I guess I'm a grumpy old man. I would agree with you about Cinderella.
I'm older than you.
You were in the Air Force. You're more optimistic. What can I tell you? I would agree with you about
Yeah, but I'm a
Cinderella for
helicopter
different
pilot.
I would agree with you about Cinderella, but for different reasons. I think she's strong because the way she communicates with mice, she clearly has several levels in Druid, which is one of the most powerful D&D
Yeah.
classes. No,
That's fair too. That's fair.
I'm kidding. No, your analysis is completely valid, obviously. So I think that's a perfectly valid way to view Cinderella. I have a hard time with all the old Disney princesses because I respect them for the achievement they were, and I'm not like, against them. My kids watch them. It's good, but I just, I think they improved the formula. Sleeping Beauty is probably my favorite because Philip actually freaking does something, like all the other worthless Disney princes. But yeah, no, I don't think you're wrong. I think that's very insightful about Cinderella. Her mythical powers aside.
Yeah, and bringing it back to the topic at hand too, you can kind of say the same. I mean, you can kind of see some of that same thing in, Vi is constantly trying to tell Powder, you are strong in your way. You are not strong like I am strong. Your strength lies somewhere else, which is a very hard thing to wrap your head around as a young person who looks up to someone else.
Yeah, no, and that I think is absolutely valid as an observation, and I really sympathize with that. So, my older brother is 6'2", blonde hair, blue eyes, and started both as a offensive lineman and a linebacker all the way through high school football. I'm 5'6", and an average athlete when I'm trying. So like it's. Looking up to him as my big brother, and I love my big brother. He was a great big brother. Still is, obviously. He's not dead. Sorry, man, you watch this. You were deceased. But as a kid, I looked up to that, and I thought eventually I might grow into that kind of a frame, and I didn't. So I get it. It is having to find your own way and figuring out what you can do well, and that your limitations aren't. They aren't the end all be all of you. What you can do is easily as important as what you're not good at. So that message I completely support. She just tripped my debate circuits when she said it as a universal statement with no qualifier, I guess, which is silly on my part to some extent. So, but yeah, loving it overall. Before we kind of close in on the climax of the episode, what any other observations you guys wanted to make before we kind of talk about how the episode closed out?
I don't mind.
Yeah, no, I think we hit everything. I really enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to continuing with it.
Yeah. So the last two things I'll say is I really enjoyed that. I don't know if it was Imagine Dragons that recorded this song too, but I like how the end of the episode closes with something that sounds like old school Motown more than modern pop. I really thought.
Yeah, I thought that was cool too.
And it was good for the atmosphere of the scene. And the last thing I'll ask is, when we closed out episode 2, did you think that Vonder was going to do it? Like, because the show kind of leaves you hanging. We've all seen episode 3, we know, but when you're watching the episode, what did you think that resolution was going to be? Because it did end on the cliffhanger.
I was surprised. What I expected, at the end of episode 2 was that we were going to have a war between Piltover and Zahn, and that it was at this point unstoppable.
Mm-hmm. Kacey?
So I watched them back to back because I wasn't gonna sit on a cliffhanger because screw that.
So you only had a few seconds to sit on that ending before you started.
Right, yeah. So I don't think I really took the time to wonder. I was just like, okay, let's see what happens,
Yeah. So I was just curious as to how effective you thought that cliffhanger was. Like, I remember
obviously I thought it was very effective because I was like, screw this. Next episode. No, I don't want to watch the intro.
Nice. Okay, so I think last comments before we close out for this episode. Okay, good. Great episode. Can't wait to talk about episode 3. That's all we have today. As always, links to Kacey's and Joelle's work and some of mine will be in the description below. Please check us out. We think we write pretty entertaining stuff.
I think those two write very good stuff.
Real quick, Kacey, what's out most recently? Pardon me. I'm not going to edit that out. I'm human.
That's fine.
What's out most recently and what's coming up next?
So my most recent novel is the conclusion to my Psyche of War trilogy, which is the conclusion is called Skies to Conquer. It is a story of a psychic woman in Vietnam looking for her missing in action son. The whole series is about psychic women at war, so check that out if you're interested. I also just recently released 2 short stories for 99 cents a piece on Amazon. One is called, the science fiction one is called Unintended Consequences, and the kind of dark fantasy with a romance twist is called Once Burned. They are, like I said, both available on Amazon for 99 cents. If you want to get Unintended Consequences for free, you can do that by signing up for my mailing list, and I will send you a copy of it along with 2 other stories. So.
Yep, that will be in the description below. And Joelle, what's out most recently, and what do you have coming up next? I mean, I know the answer, but let's hear you talk about it.
I've got a near-term science fiction novel called Dabare Snake Launcher that's coming out in November that you can pre-order now. And I am almost ready to give out for free a short story set in that same novel world. You have to sign up for my newsletter to get it.
Nice. I really need to get off my ass and make my own newsletter so I can say that sort of stuff too. Thanks for watching with us. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, or leave us a review on your podcast venue of choice if you're listening to the audio. I'll see you next time, and until then, keep up the fire.
Bye.
Bye.